They replay conversations that ended hours ago. They lie awake at 2 a.m., not because something went wrong, but because their brain refuses to stop asking, what if? And here is the paradox at the center of it all. The very intelligence that makes them so thoughtful is the same quality that quietly exhausts them. Today, we are going to explore what is actually happening in the brain of a chronic overthinker, not as a flaw to fix, as a psychology to understand.
Psychologists identify two distinct forms of rumination that are often confused because they feel similar from the inside. The first is reflective rumination, which is the mind turning inward to understand itself, process emotions, and make sense of experience. When balanced, this is genuinely a strength. It is linked to higher emotional intelligence and deeper self-awareness. The overthinker who uses reflection well becomes an extraordinary reader of people and situations. The second is brooding rumination, a more passive, distressing pattern of dwelling on problems without moving toward resolution. This is where overthinking begins to cost. Sleep quality deteriorates.
Neurologically, this comes down to the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning, analysis, and self-reflection. In chronic overthinkers, this region tends to remain highly active even during downtime. Meanwhile, the default mode network, the brain's background processing system, continuously generates internal monologue. The result is a mind that is essentially always online, always auditing, always drafting responses to conversations that haven't happened yet.
There is also a dopamine component that makes this pattern particularly difficult to interrupt. The brain releases small amounts of dopamine during problem solving, even imagined problem solving. So when an overthinker runs through a scenario, analyzing every angle, constructing mental arguments and counter-arguments, the brain is being partially rewarded just for the activity itself, not for arriving at an answer, just for thinking. This is why telling someone to simply stop overthinking is neurologically naive. The brain has a chemical incentive to keep going.
For a large number of overthinkers, the pattern does not begin in adulthood. It begins in childhood, in environments where outcomes felt unpredictable. When a child grows up in a household where moods shifted without warning, or where mistakes carried disproportionate consequences, the young brain learns a logical survival strategy. Think ahead, anticipate everything, predict what's coming so you can protect yourself. Overthinking in this context is not a personality defect. It is an adaptation, a very smart nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do. And that reframe matters enormously, because a pattern that developed as protection cannot be shamed away. It can only be understood, gradually, into something less necessary. Psychologists refer to chronic overthinking as maladaptive rumination, a tendency for the mind to cycle through the same thought patterns repeatedly, particularly around uncertainty, past events, and social interactions. Studies from Yale and the University of Michigan have consistently shown that people who ruminate are not doing so out of weakness or anxiety. In many cases, they are doing so because their brain is exceptionally good at pattern recognition. The overthinker's mind is always scanning, always processing, always looking for meaning, for potential threat, for the variable that was overlooked. The problem is not the intelligence. The problem is that the system never receives a signal to stop.
Decision paralysis sets in. Social anxiety builds from overanalyzing every interaction, every pause, every word chosen or word not chosen. The dangerous thing
is that most overthinkers oscillate between both. A moment of genuine reflection slides almost invisibly into a spiral. And because the thinking feels productive, because the brain is actively engaged, it can be genuinely difficult to notice when you have crossed from processing into looping. Here is something the research makes very clear that contradicts the way overthinking is usually talked about. A 2013 study published in Psychological Science found that people who reported higher levels of rumination also scored significantly higher on measures of cognitive empathy, the ability to understand and anticipate how others think and feel. Overthinkers are, on average, more sensitive to social nuance, more aware of how words land, more attuned to the unspoken emotional texture of a room. The very engine that makes overthinking so exhausting is also what makes these people remarkably perceptive. They notice everything. They carry the weight of possibilities. And the more they think, the harder clarity becomes, because the mind cannot think its way out of every situation. Some things have to be felt, decided, or released, not solved. Therapists who work with chronic overthinkers focus not on stopping the thoughts, but on changing the relationship to them. Acceptance and commitment therapy teaches a concept called cognitive diffusion, the practice of observing thoughts without fusing with them, noticing the thought loop without being pulled into it. Instead of the thought, "This situation is dangerous and I need to figure it out," pulling you under, the reframe becomes, "My brain is generating a concern right now." One pulls you in, the other gives you a fraction of distance. That distance is not detachment, it is agency. And for the overthinker, agency over the thinking process is the beginning of genuine rest. The challenge for the chronically overthinking mind is not to stop the thinking entirely. The challenge is to teach that mind, with patience and without self-punishment, that it is finally safe enough to rest, that the scanning can pause, that the threat is not coming, that the world will not collapse in the silence between thoughts. And that, perhaps, is the most important shift of all. Not thinking less, but learning, slowly, that less thinking is allowed. Kindly subscribe for more videos like this. Like, and if you recognized yourself in this video, comment "Overthinker" below. Kindly subscribe, like, and share. And then watch the next video, because what we cover next is directly connected to this.